Hey guys, Justin with Deep Dive Stocks here with another data dive. Today we're going to be looking at United Airlines. Let's get started. So I'm actually very excited to do United Airlines today because it one has a lot of very cool and traditional VoEx behaviors. As well, we're going to look at Deep Dive Stock's new toy, the Hedging Heat Map. And we're going to see especially with the United Airlines, what a gem when all three of these just come together and form such a beautiful picture of what's going on in the stock. So without further ado, let's get started. This is United Airlines from Friday, and this is the VoEx graph. If you haven't, definitely recommend checking out the video on my channel on VoEx graphs, and also what VoEx is, what it measures. The take-home point, though, is VoEx should be within these two horizontal lines. However, when VoEx goes above the top horizontal line into the inhibition zone, or below the bottom horizontal line into the propagation zone, this indicates that a stock is experiencing some pretty unstable price directing forces. And what's interesting about United Airlines is we see this in action. So let's first take a peek over here in March last year, right? March of 2021. We see the price rose, the blue line rose pretty substantially. And with it, VoEx got dragged more or less into the inhibition zone. This is indicative that the price action was being not well tolerated by the market, and that there were overly inhibitory forces that were now activating in like more than usual amounts. And classic case, VoEx even in the inhibition zone spiked pretty drastically upwards, and the price then began to fall. This happened again in October, November of 2021. The price rose not actually that much, right? But it sent VoEx skyrocketing into the inhibition zone, and the price fell not long after. And so again, we see in February of 2022, again, the price rose. We even see like these mini peaks of the price are matched with the pretty significant VoEx spikes, and the price fell pretty substantially. And the reason why I think this stock is such a cool one to do a data dive on is it looks like the price is again appreciating, and again, VoEx is pretty significantly rising into the inhibition zone. So what this tells us is since about June of 2021, United Airlines hasn't really been allowed to rise in price. In that every time it does with an appreciable, extent, even on these mini rises here, VoEx spikes, indicating that the market is not tolerating these rises in price, and the instability kind of unfolds, and what happens to an unstable stock? The price falls. And we see that developing here. So that's the first cool thing about VoEx. The second cool thing is, well, we'll get to the heat maps later. Moving on to the other aspects of the reports. What's interesting is the snap graphs here, they give us based off of VoEx's behavior, how that VoEx behavior typically translates to price action over 4 time intervals. And we have the 20-day or the 1 month, it's 20 trading days, 10 trading days, 5 trading days, and then 1 trading day. We see on the 1 month, we actually do still have positive, this VoEx behavior is consistent with positive returns. The same with the 2 week. However, on the 1 week, we have negative returns anticipated. And on the 1 day, we have negative returns anticipated again. And snap graphs are pretty, I wanted them to be pretty straightforward. So you simply just look to see where the crosshairs are, and if it's above or below the gold line. And then that tells you how that VoEx behavior maps out to anticipated price action. The squiggly line here is the trend line for each one of the models. And then the highlighted region is the 95% confidence interval for that trend line. Pretty significant. So we have more medium long-term bullish indications, but more short-term bearish indications. But this is what we're going to keep in mind. We're going to keep the short-term bearish indications in mind as we move on. Then what's next is we have the expected price range graph right here. So the price is the line. The dashed lines are the market's expectations for what a reasonable price movement would be for this stock. And essentially that just means we take implied volatility, distill it down into a 1 day, day-by-day metric, And then we map out by the dashed lines the range of price movement that the market is pricing in. And this is a 68% most probable price cone. And what's interesting about United Airlines is when it drops hard, right? It drops more than the market expects, even with its implied volatility. And we can visualize that because the price drops below these dashed lines. And again, it happened in January. And so what that tells us is when United Airlines is experiencing a dip, it dips hard. And sometimes it seems like sometimes on the price appreciation as well, but mainly we see that United Airlines dips harder than the market expects, more than it rises more than the market expects. Volatility here, nothing to write home about. Little volatility peak in the beginning of March when the price fell. Nothing crazy. Moving on to the shorting, nothing crazy here either. Shorting rarely tells us a fun story. The options layout, honestly, decent, right? We have a somewhat of a normal distribution curve here, where there's a good amount of out of the money calls, a healthy amount of out of the money puts rather. So the left options layout graph tells us how the options layouts are currently. And then on the right, we get the change in the options layout. So the bars indicate the change in the options from the day prior. So golden means that those strike prices closed. And then the lines tell us what the average daily change is over the past month. So what's interesting is we see over the past month, it seems like a good amount of in the money and out of the money calls have been opened up. But on Friday, a good amount of them closed. So Friday bucked the trend a little bit. Moving on to the other aspects of the report, we see that a good delta, we have a positive delta, which is healthy. So that means anytime the price falls, right? Anytime the price falls, we get a positive passive bid enters the market. So that helps stabilize the stock. And so we have positive delta, and we have good IV. So overall, besides the VoEx, which is indicating that a pattern is forming where anytime United Airlines goes up, VoEx indicates instability and then the price falls. What is so interesting about this stock? Well, Deep Dive has a new toy that's premiering here soon on the reports, and it is the Hedging Heat Map. And the Hedging Heat Map allows us to see how the changes in price and volatility affect the forces and the hedging forces on the market. And what's interesting is we see here per Friday on April 1st, although there's a positive delta, we see that if the price goes up, it gets a pretty neutral passive bid, right? It doesn't really change much. The passive bid that is currently on the stock, and we saw that with the hedging matrix. So this is the passive bid where if the price goes up, rather the hedging amount, right? And it doesn't really change. So the price can go up, nothing really changes. The hedging per point move and the hedging per IV move doesn't change. But if the price drops, we see that if the price drops down, either the spot decreases or volatility lowers, we see that the hedging actually starts decreasing and starts heading towards the selling component. So red equals selling, blue equals the buying support. And we see that although up here in the influence distribution, we see that the majority of the support is at buying, but we see the selling has this left tail risk event, right? So if the price does drop and then enters the selling pressure component of the hedging, we can expect some pretty pronounced downward price movement. Well, what's interesting is that's exactly what VoEx is telling us in a sense, right? It's telling us that this instability on this price increase is mounting, and the most likely outcome, as we've seen, is for the price to fall. So if that happens, we see that at around $41, all of a sudden, all of this passive bid that is present because of this positive delta will now start being drastically reduced, and that will slowly turn into passive ask. So that amplifies the downward movement. Well, if United Airlines downward movement gets amplified, I would imagine that it might move more than the market expects. Kind of like how it always does when the market goes down, or when it does go down. And also, not only does, so then since the in March, the United Airlines dropped more than the market was expecting by quite a substantial amount. And we also see that that was right after VoEx indicated instability on this stock. What did the heat map? What did the hedging heat map look like in the start of March? Wow, right? That's pretty cool. So it tells us that as the price started to go down and reached about $40, all of this passive bid started transitioning into passive sell. So when did and it reached right a few days later, after March 1st, it reached $40. And so all of this passive bid that was present on the stock now immediately started becoming more passive ask. So more selling started entering the market just by way of hedging. United Airlines was already in a gamma squeeze, so this already kind of predisposes the stock to go down. Then we see right at $40, that gamma squeeze starts ramping up. These things don't usually get priced into the market because people aren't aware of them. So the consequence is that these stock moves way more than the market expects, especially on the downward side. So it kind of looks like a lot of the same chess pieces that were present in March and probably in November and in June of 2021 are now forming again on United Airlines. And so that'll be something interesting to keep an eye out for. And again, we know that if United Airlines does kind of succumb to this instability, we can expect some pretty drastic downward price movement. So that is a data dive into United Airlines with deep dive stocks and our new toy, the Hedging Heat Map. I hope you guys appreciated it. The Hedging Heat Map can take some time to get used to, so I'm definitely going to do a few more videos with it. I'm also going to do there's a lot of research to go into it, some data verification, and then probably another educational primer, which there's tons of those on the website if you guys are interested, and then it'll make its way to the reports. So it's pretty exciting to see it in action in these early days. So thanks for coming. If you guys liked, please comment, like, and subscribe, and I'll see you guys next time. Bye.